Bosses, what's the craziest thing you've seen an employee do? Story 1. A guy that worked for me was getting out of his car one morning and saw one of the other managers in the company, so started talking to him. In the middle of the conversation, he whipped his willy out and started peeing on the side of his car. He was 37 years old, sober, and it was 8 in the morning. This was for a corporate job. Story 2. I manage a small weld shop. Generally, I don't care about less than clean background checks as long as you come into work every day and get work done. Finding reliable welders is difficult, so a lot of crap flies. This sometimes leads to weird employees. This one guy we hired stopped showing up. After like 3 days, he walks in the door, he's bright red from being sunburnt, and his clothes are torn to shreds. The dude was drinking on a little aluminum boat and somehow got lost at sea. He looked like Tom Hanks from Castaway. He didn't have cell phone reception, so he wasn't able to call me. He did take a bunch of pictures over the few days he was lost at sea, though, including one where he was being rescued by the Coast Guard. I gave him the rest of the week off. Coast Guard took him to the hospital, he checked himself out, and immediately came into work. Didn't even go home and shower. Odd dude. It doesn't take a less than stellar background check to get lost at sea in a little boat. Probably could happen to anyone. Though I'm not sure that everyone would be as unwise in their decision-making process. I feel like a small aluminum boat, drinking, and the open waters don't add up to safety. Thank goodness for the Coast Guard. I'm sure those guys were also scratching their heads at the situation when they picked him up. Story 3. Was a cashier manager at a big box store. There was a useless kid that finally stopped showing up. A few days go by, and I see him walk in, so I assume he's going to come right up front, and we can do the whole formal exit process since he missed shifts. He never comes up front. Nobody has heard from him. So a few weeks go by, and we just terminated him. I go back to the lunchroom one day, and the useless kid is sitting there. I ask what he's doing, and he says he's on break. I'm like, no, you stopped showing up weeks ago, and we're terminated. He leaves to go back to work. I confirmed with all managers that he was fired, not working in another part of the store. He shows up in the lunchroom again a few weeks later. Turned out he didn't want to tell his mom he didn't want to work. He kept letting her drop him off. He'd hang in the lunchroom for a bit because his mom apparently is friendly with another employee, so this way it still looks like he has a job to his mom. Story 4. One time there was this guy who has a temp at this small 30-man proto shop in Livonia. He always wanted to be hired in full-time, and one day he hatched a plan. He came in very early one morning and put up motivational signs all over the building. He made them himself out of cardboard and markers, the kind of thing you'd expect to see "will work for food" written on. The posters said things like, "If you're not giving 100% today, go home and I'll get someone who will," and "What did you do to earn your check today?" He signed all of them with the owner's name. Well, we hired him. It was hilarious. But as soon as he was full-time, he started shrieking and demanding raises. I guess he assumed he would just join the UAW and get all kinds of benefits after he was hired. But we were just a small shop and didn't even have health insurance. He was fired about a week later, and we are still finding hidden motivational posters for a month. Story 5. I had an employee call and tell me her mother passed. Well, I got an anonymous phone call from someone telling me that she was lying, so I called the number I had on file to send my regards, and I got an address to send flowers. In the meantime, the office had collected an envelope of money to help with the cost of the funeral and missing work. When I called, the mother answered and was shocked to find out her daughter used her passing as an excuse to go to Vegas for the weekend. When she returned, I held a big meeting with everyone in the office and presented her with an envelope of money and flowers. She took it and fake cried. I called her into my office to reveal that I knew and fired her and took the envelope back. She said she doesn't give an F and left. Dang. Maybe this person needs to get into the acting game if she can cry on the spot like that. It also takes a special messed up person to pull that off in front of your coworkers. Fair to say that is a tad psychotic. I'm not sure why she thought this plan would work though, because somebody who knew her and her family would probably raise the flags and be like, your mom is not dead. What happened to simply calling in sick to get off work? Story 6. A girl in a non-clinical pediatric hospital job. She was like 19 or 20 and kind of weird. Apparently, she had a crush on me, but I brushed it off because she was weird, and obviously that was unprofessional. I knew she came from a relatively messed up home, but she was fairly normal outside of being goofy and awkward. One day, she got caught giving a patient mouth-to-willy CPR in his room, and my first thought was, oh my God, this is a pediatric hospital. But luckily for her, the patient was 18. There were some kids with congenital disorders who see specialists all their life and aren't just suddenly dropped on their 18th birthday. They sort of slowly transition, and he was one of them. That was unfortunately the beginning of the end for her, as life became a train wreck afterwards. She soon got knocked up by someone else, gained like 100 and 150 pounds, and had a severely autistic child. She is constantly posting on Facebook, and it's the saddest stuff ever. Like, anyone want to have a play date with so-and-so and I? 0 comments, 0 likes. Then randomly, she'll just have massive breakdowns about how hard it is to have a severely autistic child who can barely walk. Her kid is like 4 or 5, and how she has no friends or anything. It's horribly sad. Story 7. I was a kitchen manager, and one night I was out on our back dock and saw that someone had left a full trash can sitting out beside the dumpster. I went over and started to lift the trash can to dump it into the dumpster, and when the back door opened and one of my cooks walked out, he immediately rushed over, insisting that I do not dump the trash and let him do it because, quote, "It's too heavy for you. I don't want to see you get hurt. Let me do it." Now, I am a small female, but I'm tough, and I've always been lifting heavy trash cans for years, while the guys looked on and never batted an eye, so I thought that was strange, but whatever. I just kind of put it in the back of my mind. A couple hours later, we were closed, and my employees were all leaving for the night, while I was in the office doing the deposit and finishing up the end of the day stuff. The same cook from before pokes his head into the office to say goodnight, and then, instead of heading out through the front, like everyone else had done, proceeded to head out the back door through a dark kitchen where all the lights had already been shut off. I thought that was strange too, so I turned on the monitor, which showed all the cameras that we had throughout the restaurant, and pulled up the camera for the back dock. Sure enough, the cook exited through the back door, then went behind the dumpster out of camera range, retrieved a duffel bag that was stashed back there, and left. From there, I pulled up the footage from the trash can incident from earlier and could see as soon as I went back inside, the cook looked around and then dug through the trash and pulled out something that he had buried and took it back behind the dumpster. By pulling up footage from different cameras, I was able to see that earlier in the night, he had taken the trash can into the walk-in freezer, where there are no cameras, and then exited with the same trash can a few minutes later and pushed it out the back door, where I came out and saw it about 10 minutes later. It all made sense now. So I burned a copy of all footage that I had found in sequence and left a copy of the DVD for my general manager, who was opening in the morning, with a note that read, "Watch this, I think I just solved our food cost problem." Well, the GM watched the DVD, then called the cook into the office, had him watch the DVD, and then asked him to sign his termination notice. The cook's defense was that I had set him up. He said that he had dropped some steaks on the floor and they weren't able to be used, so he asked me if he could take them home. And I said yes. Then I decided to set him up for stealing because I like to imagine that the conversation went something like this. Him: "Hey, can I take these unusable steaks home?" Me: "You most certainly can, but only if you bury them in trash and store them in your duffel bag behind the dumpster for a couple hours in the sweltering heat of mid-August." Him: "Sounds reasonable. Is it just me, or does this seem like an overly complicated way to steal a couple of steaks from a restaurant? If you already have access to the area where the food is stored, why couldn't you sneak a bag in there and drop it off in the break room or something? Surely you don't have cameras in the meat freezer," but apparently this person did not think of that. I love how he gets defensive and tries to play the victim in all this. Hope it was worth it for a couple of ribeyes. Story 8. 2 things, same store. I used to be a manager of a high-volume Starbucks inside of Target, and I had hired this 18-year-old girl who was very perky and energetic, so I thought she'd be a great fit. She went through training with no problem, was one of my top baristas, and helped me a lot with general keeping of the store. About 3 months in, though, her crazy started coming out. She was diabetic and would intentionally leave her insulin home just so that she'd have a dramatic episode at the store. She started crying in the middle of her shift to get attention from customers, and there was this one time that she wanted to go home early, but there was no one to cover for her, so she made herself throw up in the sink in the back room. Because the other 2 things were sensitive subjects, I can't write someone up for being diabetic or dealing with mental illness. If that's what she's dealing with, I couldn't do a whole lot about her. That was until one day I came to work and my loss prevention team for Target was escorting one of my other employees out of the building. I was confused and wondered what the hell was going on, but they weren't able to disclose anything at the time. Later that day, the crazy girl also gets escorted out. Still, nothing was said to me. Now, as the days go on, I saw every single one of my employees get escorted out with the exception of 2, who were also later fired. Turns out, Crazy Girl had put together this big operation of stealing pastries and sandwiches from the store and writing them off at the end of the night. Because Target differs from Starbucks, we didn't have a solid way of monitoring that kind of thing because it gets thrown in the garbage at closing instead of counted and donated. So, I lost 8 out of 8 of my employees in under 1 week because of pastry theft. I wasn't told anything about it at first because they were investigating me as well, and they didn't want to disclose in case I was also guilty. Story 9. Not an employer, but mine sure was pissed. We had a coworker that called out of work or left early all the time, bawling her eyes out, because her dad was in and out of the hospital, and in very bad condition. We all felt so bad for her, rushed to cover her shifts, offered whatever we could do to help. Shortly after I got a different job, I heard she had called out for a whole week because her dad had passed and she had to help plan the funeral. The company sent their condolences, and we all offered our help some more. A few days later, another coworker checked this girl's Snapchat and found dozens of pictures of her and her friends going to clubs and partying all week. Shortly after she brought this up to the GM, they saw her dad walking around the mall our store was in. They talked to him and found out he never even had the flu that whole time, much less been in the hospital. She got fired, and then text spammed the other coworker to, "Please talk to the GM. I know I messed up, but please, you gotta help me." Story 10. So 4 of us are in a different country, augmenting for a few months. I'm the guy in charge, and one of our guys under me is a 21-year-old starry-eyed kid. He's partying pretty hard, and he comes to work and gets his job done, so whatever, no big deal. One morning, he doesn't show up to work. I went to his hotel room, and the cleaning ladies let me in as he wouldn't answer the door or phone. He is butt naked on the floor of the bathroom snoring. Cool, so he is alive. Best I could tell, he was sitting to poop, tried to puke between his legs. We've all been there, right? And what actually happened was he missed with the puke, it was on the floor, then he passed out, he was laying on the puke, and there was a delayed response on the poop coming out while he was on the toilet. It was also on the floor. There was also a wet, empty pizza box in the shower. Other than that, the room was immaculate. Also, I got another story about him. He had gotten super into lifting weights. He was an average skinny fat, walked with ILS and constantly talked about his macros and how much his biceps had grown. They didn't like it at all, but he was a sheltered kid and just wanted to be cool, so we'd let it go. Bear in mind that the other people at this job are generally in pretty good shape. One of the IT guys calls him out and busts out a measuring tape. The IT guy goes all in the gym and is one of those guys who could give a crap less about how he looks kind of guys. IT guy beats him out by like half an inch. Old boy says to remeasure. He remeasures and the kid is flexing so hard he starts farting. 3 hard farts. It smelled like poop, but he swore to God it wasn't. It was at the end of the day, and that was a high note, so I released everyone. Some people just aren't athletic, no matter how hard they try or want to be. This young buck is a prime example because even after all of his fancy lifting and working out that he supposedly did, he still got his butt kicked by some dude who probably hasn't picked up any weights in his life. With regards to the first part of the story, how exactly does one sort of simultaneously poo and pass out at the same time? That is some special talent right there. Story 11. I was working for a company that did catastrophic insurance claims. Basically, if a tornado or hurricane hit town Y, they would send a whole load of us out there to adjust all the claims due to massive property damage. They'd fly us in, put us up in hotel rooms, we'd bring our laptops, and we would just adjust claims all day and night to get that underway. Our company used to keep a Rolodex of adjusters for whenever the need arose. We weren't an insurance carrier. We were an independent company. So most of the adjusters weren't getting paid unless there was work. So it made for a nice part-time gig for self-employed adjusters. Anyway, I met up with my new team at the airport. Some regulars, some new folks. We were going to Wisconsin following a tornado. One of my new recruits is a kid, he was like 19, who was wearing an oversized t-shirt and cargo pants. So I'm starting to wonder if this kid lied on his resume or his dad is actually the adjuster and he showed up in his place. Nope, he's the adjuster, has a license, went to school for it, has specialty certs. But this was the first ever CAT team and he's only been in the business for about 2 months. Well, we all have to start somewhere, right? So we arrive in rural Wisconsin and they put us up at a Super 8, the only hotel for miles. It was a decent place, pretty new and very clean. From the time our boots hit the ground, we were adjusting claims, and the kid proves out reasonably competent at his job. Got quite the future. What we didn't account for was that he completely lacked the emotional maturity to be doing this sort of work this far away from home. After 2 days, he got incredibly mopey because he missed his girlfriend. Then he started snapping at people, us and the clients, because he was convinced she was cheating on him. So, out of a combination of spite and loneliness, he decides he's going to do the dirty with a local. As many locals are oddly willing to do it with him, actually, he ravaged that town. He did a waitress at the only restaurant within walking distance. He did a fellow adjuster who was married. He did an adjuster from another company who was in town. He did a housekeeper at the hotel. And he did the 50-year-old divorce manager at the hotel. We had been gone for a total of 4 days. On day 9, we were out just shy of 2 weeks, and he's gone. I don't mean mentally, I mean he disappears. After a few hours of me thinking someone shot him because he was caught doing their wife, I found out that he had changed his return plane ticket to leave that morning. He just left and went home because he couldn't take being without his girlfriend, who was still in high school, any longer. Making matters worse, I had to rent his room because they refused to rent rooms to anyone under 21. Manager, the one he banged, calls me into the room. The room is trashed. It smells like crap. Every surface was sticky with what we believed to be Mountain Dew. There was a mountain of jack-off tissues cast to the side of the bed with a fine, dried, used rubber crust forming on top of it. Garbage can was filled with old pizza covered in bugs. And there were half-eaten sandwiches under the bed. The mirror was broken. And then someone took a crap in the tank of the toilet. Adult films were scattered everywhere. He put up a do not disturb sign on his first day and never let them clean the place. On top of the mess, he had also been using the room phone, because cell service was crap, to call across the country to talk to his girlfriend all night. Story 12. I've posted this before. Was head of an operational department in a bank. We do offer Wi-Fi for our employees that they are allowed to connect to with their own devices. The Wi-Fi is not connected to the internal network. They have to log on with personalized credentials, and we monitor usage, time, sites visited, etc. to track abuse. All of that is clearly stated in the terms of use that they have to sign together with the employment contract and code of conduct. If they don't want their activities logged, they're welcome not to use it. You can even refuse to sign, since it is a separate agreement, and simply don't get credentials. No big deal. One guy signed everything, and not even 10 minutes later, I get a notification that my new employee had opened a well-known adult site. I approach him, remind him of the policy he just signed. He apologizes, mumbles something about having it open in his phone's browser, and the browser just reconnects. Okay, whatever. 5 minutes later, I get another notification about him trying to access yet another adult site. When he saw me walking over to his desk again, he got visibly uncomfortable. I told him to pack his stuff and not come back. He didn't even try to argue his way out. Now, I don't mind adult videos, and you're welcome to do whatever at home, but a blatant violation of workplace policies, especially after a first verbal warning not even 1 hour into the job, yeah, that's just asking for trouble. I bet most people aren't even aware of what they are signing or agreeing to when they use that work stuff. Between work computers, work Wi-Fi, and sometimes a work phone given to you, you better believe that all that stuff is closely monitored by at least somebody. That guy just couldn't help himself, apparently, and had to be on those sites now and couldn't wait till he got home. Maybe a quick fix here. Use a phone and your cellular service and maybe not use the Wi-Fi? I don't know. Call me crazy. In the comments, anyone have a coworker that did something so blatantly obvious and against policy